Welcome to Refuge Freedom Stories, brought to you by Refuge Ministries Canada. For the next half hour, your hearts will be filled with hope as you hear real-life stories of people who have been changed by the power of God. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Refuge Freedom Stories. I'm your host, Johnny T, and my returning guest is Julian Raven. In our first episode together, Julian discussed how God intimately showed him that he actually existed and took him from a place of atheism to theism. So Julian, welcome back, and let's continue our journey of faith together as we understand how God revealed himself to you in a much greater way.
Thank you, Johnny. Once again, thanks for having me on. And yes, it's a blessing, really, and an honor for me every time I share my story because I get excited. It's just like you were saying at the end, you're reminded of how good he is and how he personally meets each one of us where we are. And I believe, obviously, it has a lot to do with our search and pursuit of him, because he's screaming to the whole world through creation every day. And people just walking by and not seeing it. And so it's like we have to be the ones pursuing, like he is the rewarder, as we know, of those who earnestly seek him. And I can testify to that. And this next part also is just about he is so faithful to answer us in our own wiring of the mind, questioning how we're trying to fathom and make sense of the world. He will fit the answers right to what we need. It's remarkable.
I agree 100% with that. And it's so true that, as you said, for those who diligently seek him, we will find him. And that's the passion of my heart every single day. So let's continue on with your story.
Wonderful. Well, after that it was like an epiphany, I then was sitting, and my business was I was still working in the bars that I had, but it was September of 1992. And after the summer season, there's nothing to do during the week. You're only open 2 days a week, Friday night and Saturday night. It's a tourist season cycle. You only go with Christmas or Easter or summer, and the rest of the year is nothing going on.
Just before we go any further, I forgot to ask you at the end of the last episode, people will find out more about you and your story. Where would they go?
Well, I have quite a bit of it written in the book, which is Odious and Cerberus, and that's part of my journey, which is like the next part of the story, which is the free speech battle that I'm in. That has a pretty good summary of part of the story. I'm writing presently the prequel to that story, which is what I'm about to share with you now, is then the other details. I sort of give like an overview of my conversion. The book, the way that I wrote it as a gospel tool, really for the unbeliever, because it brings you into these different facets of my life, but constantly bringing you to the awareness of my faith and how I came to faith and why I came to faith and how my faith affected all of the other things that I was involved in the book. So that book, Odious and Cerberus, An American Immigrant's Odyssey and His Free Speech Legal War Against Smithsonian Corruption, that is a good place to find a decent version of my testimony. This, where we are right now, will be the next best place in the sense of giving a concise 2 or 3 part resume of my testimony.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's continue on with your story.
So after that wonderful dramatic intervention, then I was sitting around like, now what? Now what do I do? I'm like, okay, I believe in God and, now what do I do? And so I had this sense to wait, and I would be sitting on the porch of this home where I wasn't working because I was, during the week, it was my art studio. I was painting, trying to develop my artistic gifts. But I'd spend a lot of time meditating and thinking and writing in my little journal, my questions still. Now it was, wow, if God exists, and what's this all about? Who is he? Where is he? It was a blank slate. I had nothing, zero. So I'm sitting on the porch, and these people turn up in the little community where my family house was, where you could see the courtyard of little houses, little tiny casitas, Spanish-style little houses. And these 2 people start walking, and they go door to door. Knock on the door over there, and then no one's in there. And again, because of the time of year, it's a tourist place, a lot of the people are not there. So the house is empty, and the house is empty. And I'm like, those people are coming to speak to me. I knew it. And I stood up, and I greeted them like before I even got to the front door. And they knock on the door, and they start talking to me about the Bible. And I'm like, oh, this is great. They give me all these books. Well, turns out it's a group by the name of Jehovah's Witnesses. And again, I don't know anything. I don't know who Jehovah's Witnesses are, but they're the first people to turn up with their information. And so I'm like, okay, well, they started to come back and try to have me have a Bible study with them. And And they were like, we like to visit you, maybe like once a week for half an hour. And I'm like, oh, forget that. I said, I'm not working right now. I said, I'm coming to your house. And I went 5 days a week, 3 hours a day to this old guy's house because I'm dying. I'm thirsty. I'm like, oh, I have the time. And I turn up on my motorcycle, my leathers, and I'm going to sit with this old guy for 3 hours a day. And I'm demolishing all their books and rapidly become this JW and baptized. And God is working, really working. The insanity of my mind and in my pursuit, I'd thrown off any type, in my brain, any restraints. It was suddenly like putting on a spiritual helmet that was, like a steel trap. And I then become a missionary. God is working in me, leading me, guiding me, leading my thoughts. And then I get a call to the missions and I leave everything. I get a call to abandon everything. I left the businesses and the motorcycles and the toys, and I signed it all over. My mother and my brothers, they thought I was mad. And I said, you think I'm mad? Our bar was called Locos. It was called Crazy. And now I'm crazy? I said, we were always crazy, right? It's like, well, I found what I was looking for. And they were furious. I was rejection then from my family, complete rejection. My mother, you betrayed me. How could you do this? And I'm like, what? I said, I found what I was looking for. I found the answer. I didn't know really about Jehovah's Witnesses at all, but I knew that God was using that, and he was. And so I then go to the mission field all alone, self-funded, with a little tiny income that I had and my faith. And it was 2.5 hours down the coast of Spain to a city called Almeria and a town called Roquetas de Mar, which was an immigrant African town where all of these immigrants from Africa would basically gather there because it was a town which had huge agricultural industry. So they were used as very cheap labor in all these farms. And yet there was hundreds of them. And I'd seen a bunch of them at a conference. And the Lord had pointed out to me, and these guys were just, these African guys just gathering by themselves in this conference. And it was like, they're like a sheep without a shepherd. And will you go to them? And I was like, sure, why not? And so I give up everything. And then everyone, he's lost his mind. And I just grab my bags and I leave my home and I go on the mission field. And there I'm living with these guys. Really just, you have a real burden to help because a lot of them in really desperate bottom of the barrel living conditions. And so I end up sharing amazing journey of learning just on a cultural level to learn. I was working in 4 languages, in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and English. There's so many, because there were Africans from like 30 different nations in this town, all from the different parts of Africa that are either English-speaking or French-speaking or Spanish-speaking or Portuguese-speaking. So I'm then learning French, having Bible studies with French-speaking guys. They wanted just to learn English. So they wanted me to teach them. And I said, well, I'll teach you English, and I'll use the Bible, and I'll teach you the Bible. So it was like a trade. So it was all good. But then there was this real gnawing inside of me, like an emptiness that was constantly with me. There was something missing. I couldn't put my finger on it. And then one day I meet this older gentleman who's a JW, an American guy from California, and he takes me under his wing and really, really becomes a mentor, like a father to me, like I'd never had. My dad died when I was very young, and this guy really loved me. And he was an older guy and lived near where I was living, and so I'd visit him. And it turns out, again, God meeting the need. He's a real avid Bible student. But his thing to me was focus on the scriptures and sort of don't focus on their publications. And he was an outlier. And he ends up getting me from the United States, not only shoes, because I have big feet, and in Spain, they didn't have size 14. Anything stopped at like 12. So he'd bring me over large sandals from the US, but he also brought me Christian books. He brought me Colin Brown's Four Testament, a series of New Testament theology, and then the concordance that's out there. I'm not sure who it was, whether it was Thompson's or Strong's, and then a Greek interlinear. So I got these books, and then he sits me down one day and he shows me this inductive study method, and he teaches me how to begin, because my questioning and answering about the Bible, I didn't know how to approach it. So he starts to teach me how to dismantle it word by word using the interlinear, and you can see the Greek word, and then you can use the cross-reference with the number, and you can go to this dictionary, the 4-volume, and you can start to get a real understanding of the original sense or meaning of that word and how that word was. So he once he did that, I'm like, this is great. I locked myself away all day, like 10, 12 hours a day. I used to put earplugs in my ears so I couldn't hear any noise or be disturbed. and I was away all alone. Again, I was blown away. It's God satisfying that emptiness that I was trying to obviously now understand what the book said. This is my questioning again. And the Lord is leading me, but I don't really know. And he leads me. I started on the small epistle and then getting into the bigger epistles and then into the Gospels. And I'm in the Gospel of John again, and I'm at the crucifixion. And the Jehovah's Witnesses, they don't imply it wasn't a cross. They say, oh, it was just like a tree, like a vertical tree. I didn't know any difference, so I'm like, all right, whatever. But the Lord leads me, and I'm studying this passage now. And in my mind, I can see clearly that Jesus is there crucified with these two evildoers or thieves next to him. And 1 minute they're like cursing him, mocking him. And then the next minute, one of them is like, Lord, remember me when you get into your kingdom. And Jesus says to him, truly, truly, I say to you today, you will be with me in paradise. And right at that moment, it was as if Jesus was standing next to me and asked me, what did that guy do to go? How did he get in? Because the JWs were all about this performance religious system of doing this, getting brownie points and giving away books and writing it all down, and as if you're buying and earning your way. Another typical religious performative system. Pretty different. I'm just doing what they said. I'm just going to go, all right, I'm just doing. So now I get the question, so well, what did this guy do? And I see this guy in my mind nailed to this tree, like wriggling like a fish. And he's like, he's nailed and he can't do a thing. He can't do a thing except confess with his mouth, believe in his heart, say, Lord, Lord. The minute he says that, he immediately is confessing who he is and mocking 1 minute. Lord, remember me when you get into your kingdom. And so that's an incredible confession of faith and a belief in Jesus's ability. Imagine the guy who knew nothing about who Jesus was, but he knew enough to know that this man next to him was able to get him into the kingdom. As a Jew, he knew enough to say, Lord, remember me when you get into your kingdom, Lord. So that confession, and Jesus replies, yeah, truly, truly, I say to you today, you're going to be. And I was like, oh, he did nothing. He did absolutely nothing. He believed and confessed. And at that moment, it was as if God reached inside of me again and pulled out the old me, like a video cassette back in those days. He pulled out the old video cassette, took it out, and he put a brand new one inside of me. And I was born again. And I didn't know what born again was. I think the Bible that I was studying said it was either born from above or something. They didn't have that term. So it's reborn. I had no idea what was going on. I get born again. I get baptized with the Holy Spirit all alone in my room by myself, a little freaked out, to be honest with you, because I do not know what's going on. And I'm like, oh, this is like really something, the presence of God. And it was so strong, Johnny, that when I used to walk around, I used to think that someone was following me, and I'd be looking over my shoulder because it was like I could feel the presence of someone else. I would drive along in my little car, and I'd pull over to the side of the road. I can remember sliding down in my seat and on the side of the road, and I'm like overwhelmed with the presence of God. I'm like, oh, God, we're having koinonia. I knew the Greek term for fellowship and communion. I'm like, God, this is koinonia. And I'm like, oh, it was just the most wonderful time in my life. Again, all alone. And now I'm preaching. I'm a preacher in this JW system. So I'm like, I got this. I got the answer. All this silliness that we do. So I start preaching from their pulpit. Salvation's by faith. I said, it's by faith and faith alone. So I have this full revelation of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that it's by faith alone. Look at this guy. And I'm like, oh, the elders of this church, all these guys, these Spaniards, it was like suddenly their teeth came out. I'm sort of naive in many ways in life. I think I sort of go through life just sort of, whether it's wishful thinking or just thinking the best of people. And sure enough, these guys suddenly turn on me and they're now persecuting me. And I was like, what? What in the world? I thought they would be like, this is great. You got the guy. You got the answer. We were all, and no, forget that. You're now the heretic and we're coming for you. And I was now again alone. Now all the relationships that I had built, they rapidly moved to sever you from fellowship. They rapidly slander you, and they start saying this. They're trying to get you into one of their judicial hearings where they can then tar and feather you spiritually and then banish you so that you cannot infect their sheep. Well, I can see what they're doing. I'm not going to give them the pleasure of their intent. I wrote this huge treatise. I denounced all their false teachings one by one because now the Holy Ghost was working in me. I could understand the scriptures, like the scales fell off my eyes. I was like, look at this. This is garbage what they're teaching. And this is garbage. And this is garbage. And, so I then denounce all their false teaching, write this thing. I mail it off to Brooklyn, New York. I mail it to these other people. And I'm like, sayonara. And I pack my bags and I get out of their reach. So they couldn't do what they were doing. And I went back to my home in Marbella, to the laughter and mockery of my family. Now they're like, oh, what happened? It didn't work out. Oh, yeah. They were already mocking me because of my faith. Now they're mocking me because of this. And I'm like, it's just bad. And then these people, they track me down to my home and they try to turn up. You're by yourself. Thank God for the friend that I had who was like my mentor, Miller, who was passed. He had gone through a similar understanding of scripture. And he was an older guy. Family, all wife and mother, everyone, all long, big family as JWs. And he came to a similar understanding, and we were corresponding like daily. Back then, there was no email or anything. So I was writing from Spain. I'd be writing him letters daily, and letters would be arriving from him daily. And we're trying to like match up the dialogue between which letter was, it was amazing time. But he came to the same conclusions. And what did they do to him? They booted him out. His wife divorced him. He was just totally banished and had his life like ripped away. Family, his children, they wouldn't speak to him. I mean, it's wicked. And I then and him, we're the only friends we have in the world. We're the only people, I'd never met a Christian before. I'm just by myself in southern Spain. So I'm like, what? I'm just got to get out of here. I got to buy a ticket. The only thing I had of value left after leaving my bar and all that was my photographic camera. And I get the camera and sell the camera. I was trying to sell some paintings that I had, and I was like, forget it. Gave my art away to my friends, even my brothers, so they'd have something to remember me from. And I said, I'm going to America. I'm leaving. I'm leaving you. I'm going. I bought the ticket. I had $200 in my pocket. That's it. I had my Bibles from my friend Mark Miller, clothes, and I left Spain on my journey now to the United States. And my plan was to spend time with Mark Miller in California, work out what we believe, study the Bible together to actually find out now what we believe. We just learned that the majority of the things that we believe are all just bonkers. It's all lies. It's false teaching. It's heresy. So what do I believe? I didn't know. I thank God that he had given me such a powerful encounter with him, because that was the anchor that prevented me from just going back into the hellhole from where I came, because that was really tempting. My family and brothers, oh, you're just going to come back to us and all this type of stuff. And I'm like, nope. I was studying. I was more determined than ever to understand the Bible, because now I'd been given the tools, and I was studying and prints of the book of Revelation all over my wall and study. I was just like, thank God, consumed, hungry, thirsty to know what I believed. And I then packed my bags. Again, my mother, devastated. How could you do this? You're leaving us. Before you left us to go now you're going to America. Oh, they were furious. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I got to go. I got to go and find my way. And I go pack my bags, get the ticket, and I leave to the United States. And that was February of 1996. And to start that journey off, and what happened to me in that next 6 months was a constant experience of the manifest intervention of God in my life on a daily basis, providing miraculously. And I think for the next show, which is really the part about my journey for your audience, I had the most amazing thing happen to me on the streets of New York City. Again, God's intervention and provision on this journey. I had $200 in my pocket. That was it. And yet the Lord provided, as I was planning in my little brain to work in California for 6 months, save up some money. I said, I'm going to save up $2,000 and buy a donkey and cart in Mexico, fill it with New Testaments in Spanish, and then I'm just going to clip-clop south with a donkey and cart and preach the gospel. And when my little money runs out, I just live by faith. I'm fluent in Spanish. There's Hispanic people, beautiful people. I'm just going to go have an adventure with Jesus down in South America. That was my plan, my ultimate goal of coming to the United States. But God had other plans for me.
That'll be our segue to our third and last part of our interview together for sure. And it always amazes me how, when you were talking about the persecution that you faced, I just read this morning in my devotions about Stephen. And when Stephen, the disciple, was put in front of the crowds and the leaders and all that, and he basically went through the whole history of the gospel.
Yeah.
And essentially came to presenting that same revelation that they said, well, you need to confess that Jesus Christ is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead and you'll be saved. And what did they do? They stoned him, but yet he saw the glory of God as he was preaching that. And just that experience that you've had, I think back on some other things, and it just cements our faith so much when God takes the scales off our eyes and gives us that revelation that he is, and he is the author and finisher of our faith. And it just grounds us in a way that people who haven't had that experience don't understand it. I remember people would say, Johnny, what really happened to you? It's like, well, where do you start? And I remember one poor girl, she said, what really happened to you? And it was like, the fire hose of my testimony just kind of, she's like, oh, okay. And we don't understand where we are in God's plan of one waters, one sows, and one reaps. But we have to be faithful to continue to share what God's done in our life with others. So let's just finish this off here. Maybe give people your website where they can reach you, and then we'll pick up the final part of this interview in our next episode.
Thank you. My art website is julianraven.com, and my activist website is smithsoninstitution.com, not Smithsonian, Smithson, like James Smithson Institution.com.
Perfect. Okay, well, I look forward to continuing this conversation with you in our next episode, and I invite our audience to come back and join in this riveting discussion. So God bless you always.
Thank you, Johnny.
What I am. If you ask, can someone beat the odds time and time again? What's the use of running to win if the future's all laid out and we just labor within? To those who endure till the end, crown of life shall be placed upon their head. Living proof is what I am. If you ask, can a heart be broken and rebuild once again? What's the use? I've asked myself too, but the promise of a better time keeps me pressing through. The greater the battle to be won, the greater the victory when we overcome. And I've had my share of trials, tests, and cares, but love has come and brought me out from there. To go and shine a light, to stand and speak the truth, to go and show our world, live and prove. trials, tests, and cares. But love has come and brought me out from there. To go and shine a light, to stand and speak the truth, to go and show our world, live and prove.
I hope that you have enjoyed the last half hour. Thank you again to Refuge Ministries Canada for hosting the show. So until next time, may God richly bless you with peace, love, and happiness.
We at Refuge Ministries are so blessed by the success of Refuge Freedom Stories and podcasts. In addition, we focus on youth prison ministry, release kits, and many other diverse outreaches to the needs of our community. As a nonprofit, there are many costs involved, however, and we are asking for your support. Financial gifts can be made via our website at www.refugeministriescanada.com or by calling 519-701-0108. Your giving makes this work possible, and we thank you in advance for your support. That's 519-701-0108. God bless you.